to Foucault. But you know where I see, maybe if you allow me very briefly, what does this mean for our, I like to make these jumps, for our concrete analysis today? I never accept simple oppositions like neoconservatives versus, I don't know how you call them, political correct, cancel, liberals, and so on. And now precisely apropos Russia, Putin, Ukraine, and apropos the danger now approaching my part of the world, there was a crisis in Kosovo and so on. You know what shocks me? These basic contradictions of today's Trump-style neoconservatives or Putin-like European populists, how on the one hand they pretend to defend traditional Christian values, stability, and so on from the postmodern historicist relativist madness. And they are fighting, of course, straw man, because if you read closely Derrida, his position was never that. Derrida was, for me, at his best when he pointed out how his position is not simple historical relativism. Historical relativism is the most arrogant position. It means you pretend that you can step out of on your own back and objectively look at the world and see the relativity of everything. Okay, what surprises me is that this, very brief I will be, that these defenders of Christian civilization in their textual practice, by this I mean in their actual discourse, how they act socially. Can you imagine people who are more obscene, prone to dirty jokes and so on? Like it was never clear for me, how can you consider Trump taking, with regard to his lifestyle, the way isn't he a kind of a ridiculous caricature of a postmodern relativist, cynicist, and so on? And that's why what we should emphasize is that what Russia and their allies are doing now, it's not just a battle for a piece of Ukraine, it's a kind of a radical cultural revolution, which, again, on one hand, it presents itself as neoconservative in the sense of winning itself, but on the other hand, I'm now systematically following, and here is the true danger, I think, how this Russian politics, exemplary, I know the case in Serbia, Vučić, their president, recently made a speech where, on behalf of, the topic was defending Christian values. He spoke about gay people, homosexuals, in a breathtakingly, openly vulgar way. He didn't use the term gay or homosexual, he used the term pedery, which is like And he went and he established the line between the West in general, liberalism, and he painted what he called as the main danger to Serb nation, the main danger to the existence of Serb nation, and he ended his speech with, there should be no long live Serbia. You know, and this is for me crucial. This is not here you have surplus enjoyment. You cannot be a pure patriot. Today's neoconservatism, this is its excess. This is its truth. Okay. And that's so horrible today.
Okay. I'm conscious.
Sorry, yes.
Very conscious of time. And, you know, we've covered a lot of ground already, and we're even entering kind of Serbian politics now, which I don't want to go into much further.
No, but just as an example of breathtaking vulgarities. Sorry, can I mention?
Well, actually, Slavoj, I'm going to put you on pause because we've got other voices who want to join the conversation. I think it's important to hear from them. We've got some questions that have come in already via, I'm looking on my screen. We've had some through the chat. We've had some through email. So I'm going to, I don't know if you can see them too, but I'm going to filter these a little bit for the sake of economy. and put them to you, Slavoj.
I prefer not to see them.
Okay, yeah. Let me. We've got a young person who is fortunately or unfortunately writing a dissertation on Trump. Now that's a phrase to chill the bones if ever there was one. But anyway, a year or so ago, you wrote of Trump. Did Trump really want to make a coup d'etat? Unambiguously, no, was your answer. And he's wondering if your view has changed based on the January 6th hearings. Did Trump wish to make a coup d'etat? What do you think now based on the January 6th hearings? That's the first question from Emmet Pex.
Yeah. No, I still did not do it, but I think the real danger is coming now. I think that at that point, Trump was still playing this populist game. Let's move things, but it was all state which he said he wasn't Steve Bannon who said, I'm a Leninist, I want to destroy state. But you know what makes me really afraid now? And I can already see the contours of some kind of a coup d'etat. It's not only Roe versus Wade. It's that now we see what is happening with Trump's Supreme Court. You know, he nominated 3 younger persons, which means we will not get rid of them for decades. And what really worries me, this is happening now secretly, but it makes me horrified. Did you see how they now plan to reactivate one of these small points in the legal order which we were all ignoring, that if the result of elections in a state is not clear, then the state Congress, or I don't know even what organ of a state, one of the American states, can cancel election result and directly nominate delegates. You know what this means? You know what space this gives to Trump to really make a kind of a constitutional coup d'etat. So this is what makes me really afraid. So if I may conclude with something for which I was already accused of promoting violence and so on. Did you see the movie Pelican Brief?
Oh, yes.
Julia Roberts, Denzel. Yeah. Okay, a big guy shoots, kills 2 judges of Supreme Court, so that he wants to pass some legal measures. He knows these 2 guys will sabotage it. I'm almost tempted. I don't mean this seriously. I'm not crazy, but you know, my first idea was maybe we need a leftist Pelican Brief to organize the needs of those judges. The situation is so serious. So, sorry, just to finish that, I even think that maybe, as it was already hinted at in the 6th of January last year, maybe we, the constitutional progressive liberal, will even need the help of the army.
Okay, I think that's interesting because right, because what I heard you saying almost was that Trump didn't want just to make a coup d'etat, or doesn't want to just make a coup d'etat. It's something more radical than that, because a coup d'etat really just suggests change of regime, or in his case, a continuation of regime. What you're really describing is changing the nature of the etat altogether. I think. Yes. Okay, let me pick out another couple of questions. We've got a question about trans, but the one before that, we've got one about Jordan Peterson. We've got one about state crimes against democracy. We also had one about...
Make your choice.
Okay, cinema desire. The cinema tells us what to desire. There's a quote back. Is that from the Sublime Object? It's an early quote, isn't it? And the question here, which I can't now, sort of disappeared. Hang on, just give me a second. Yeah, cinema tells us how to desire. The question is, would you agree this attempt to physically control humans through biochemical means is just a new manifestation of something that's been around with us for much longer, since the cinema itself? So, you know, Hegel and a wired brain, for example, is that argument really just a continuation of what you were already saying, I suppose, about the technologies of cinema?
Not really. First, if you want it at a certain basic level, it's not even only Hegel, only cinema. That's the function of ideology. Yeah. Not in a brutal way to control us, but, you know, like when you have a non-articulated desire, wish, it structures your space so that the options which are already there in advance are offered to you as real, as the only actual options. So no, I think that what will happen with these new surveillance strategies, wired brain and so on, is nonetheless something more radical. Because the processes that I described, cinema and so on, it is still alienation in a good sense. Alienation in the sense that we are flowing within a space which nobody really controls. And this is what Hegel likes to describe. How things go wrong, you want something, you get caught into what Hegel would have called social substance, something totally different comes out, and so on. Now the threat is much, much greater.
Okay, good. All right, and I'm conscious of time, and then the next question might have to be our last because it is such a big question. The one I'm picking out is from Alexandra Uibariu, I think is her last name. She's just about to submit her PhD thesis on state crimes against democracy. And her question is, are capitalism and democracy inherently incompatible in your opinion? They are in mine. And if so, have we ever witnessed a true modern democracy? So capital and democracy inherently incompatible, or can they be reconciled in some way?
Well, first, I would say something which may sound strange for still some kind of a Marxist, but I still think that don't underestimate capitalism. Marx was always emphasizing this. Although it was illusory freedom, capitalism, precisely by depriving us of all old patriarchal traditional ties, did open up a space of freedom. We should never, before we criticize capitalist democracy or the notion of human rights as false, we should never forget that progress immediately imposed itself by people who simply wanted to make a step further. Like, yes, the first notion of human rights.
Just going to stop you on that one point before you continue, because it's interesting. You talked about the kind of feudalism of capitalism today, but in a sense now what you're saying was actually the genius of capitalism in its origins, in its early modern form, was to be a post-feudal means of access to wealth for many more people beyond the feudal bound. Yeah. Right, so it's kind of both. All right.
Yeah, but today, but that aspect of capitalism is under threat today. But again, to be very brief, as far as I can, first, never forget that for Marx, always, the only path to a hopefully higher form of freedom goes through capitalism. And Marx was right here. I don't believe in any returns to pre-modern forms like some of my Latino American friends who see even in the Inca Empire or whatever visions of future communism. I don't buy that. What my thesis is more specific. My thesis is that today capitalism is less and less able to live with even, however false it was, the so-called, for Marxist, bourgeois formal democracy and so on. One way is to make it irrelevant. Maybe the state of the future is here, Switzerland. I love it. Do you know, first, nobody knows. Do you know who is the prime minister? Do you know? Nobody knows, even Swiss people.
Can you give me a minute
kind
to
of
Google
a true, transparent democracy? No, sorry?
Give me a minute to Google.
Yeah, you can Google that. No, what I'm saying is that it's not just that this democracy is false and so on, is that the approaching today, global warming, pandemic, and so on. I don't think that the parliamentary democratic machine is strong enough to cope with them. We need to reinvent a political system which, A, would open up the space for stronger international collaboration. It's clear that with global warming, tens of millions, at least, of people will have to move to other places and so on. And point two, we need a system, and here China has an advantage, although I'm not pro-Chinese, you know, they can make long-term plans, projections. Nobody in our democracies dares to do it. You always worry about next elections and so on and so on. So what I'm saying is, I'm not just dismissing liberal democracy. Let's not make just fun of it. It did bring great things. How did workers' movement arouse? So that people start to ask, yes, we want also liberal freedoms, but isn't it that these freedoms always has to be rooted or are only possible within certain social conditions? If you don't have education, access to healthcare and so on, then your freedom is empty and so on. So my point is that we should here address liberals as colleagues, friends, and tell them, do you mean it seriously with your freedoms? Then you should join us. Okay,
very good. I think that's a great note to, that is probably a great note to end on, Slavoj. There are more questions, obviously, and clearly there's all sorts of topics we could continue with. I'll hand back to Luke.
Sorry, you have mentioned one sentence, Jordan Peterson, no?
We don't have time to go into
what he did recently, the total catastrophe. He is lost now. He took the pro-Russian side and so on, no?
Okay. Just to remind people, I'm doing your promotion for you here, Slavoj. Just to remind people,
really
here's your beautiful pink book that you can purchase in the English. Thank you, Slavoj. Thanks for your time today. I'll hand back to Luke to give any finishing notices. But just to thank you again. Luke, are you there?
I'm really grateful to you for your patience and understanding, because let's face it, at some level, I am, with all my pseudo-liveliness, I am a little bit crazy. And thanks very much for your patient and, how should I put it, democratically authoritative way to control me.
It's a pleasure.